Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of GeekVerse podcast. I am your host, Taylor, and today we're continuing our spoilers review of Chucky Season 2, diving into Episode 5. Now, before we get into that, a couple of plugs. Be sure to check us out with your internet connection in the search bar. GeekVerse.ca is our home base. GeekVerseCast is our Twitter. GeekVerse on our Facebook. I'm just kind of paranoid. Yes, okay. I just want to make sure my mic settings were the right thing there. I forgot to do that before we went live. But when you're done looking at us on our website, GeekVerse.ca, you can find us with our social media channels, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Patreon. We can get ad-free early episodes available there. Great stuff, including we have to have a major shout out to these fine folks here. Let me just toggle the thing. Usually I got Kirklin to help me out with this. We got our Patreon producers, Aaron Braden, April Darkness, Smalley Biggs, Joshua Wright. You folks are fantastic. Thank you for your mounting support of our show and our content we do. You guys are legendary. So like I said, Patreon, ad-free, early, exclusive episodes available on that feed. Additionally, you can tune in to manscaped.com where you can get access to a 20% off deal using the code GVPOD. Free shipping, amazing products. Definitely check them out. And last but not least, we are closing in this weekend, November 5th, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, is our 6th annual 24-hour Extra Life charity stream. We have a goal of $3,500. It's all going towards the BC Children's Hospital. Tax deductible. You get a write-off receipt after you donate. This is all going towards a good cause. Travis has been working tirelessly day in and day night. Day in and day night? I think I screwed it up like Kirklin did. I digress. He's working so hard. He's been plugging away hours and hours to just deliver on all this content, planning the board games, the tournaments, the trivia, everything that's going to be going on. It's going to be a great time. So please definitely tune in. You will not be disappointed. And I think that's it. That's pretty much everything. Aside from that, we got Black Panther coming next week for review, and just check out our news episodes. We got stuff popping up every left, right, and center spot you can imagine. So without further ado, let's get into our review for episode 5. Now, this episode, I was wondering what they were going to get. I imagine that we're going to get something following up with the kids after last week's very heavy centric focused episode on Glenn, Glenda, and Jennifer. And again, not a spoiler, but yes, we got a little bit of everything in this episode. At the end of it, I was so ecstatic. I was really, really stoked on everything that we got to explore. I feel like we really got to look into some really good developing one-on-ones with many of these characters and combinations that I wasn't really expecting either. And that just, again, it adds so much more to the development and the story and the narrative overall. We got a lot of answers as well so far, and yes, we are nearing, we're past the halfway point now for this series. So we are going to be leading in towards the ending, I imagine, at some point here sooner or later. At least like building towards it, I should say, not leaning into it, but we're getting towards that end point. And this episode definitely felt like we were putting our feet down and getting into more of the nitty-gritty story, where the previous episodes were kind of the setup, obviously, and then they were also bringing in some things we wanted to see from the past and the whole overall Chucky lore and Chucky history with all the films. So it was very nice to get to this point now where we're getting into some conclusive components, you could say. And overall, I'm just loving everything that we see. This show has been doing so many wacky things, particularly in this episode, which I'm going to speak to one of these things. It totally just caught me off guard. I've been trying to figure out and map in my head the trajectory of what we're going to be seeing with some of our characters, and particularly, again, not a spoiler, but the good guy Chucky version, just to see what could unfold with all that. And this episode definitely left me open-ended, wondering again what we're going to see. So I didn't really get much in that front, but I think that's a good thing. I really do. At the end of the day, this show has just been doing so many things right that it's hard for me to really look at it with being so negative. I see a lot of people talking about how, it's super woke and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, like you don't need to, I can't call it like that. I can't say how you should interpret something because everyone's going to interpret it in their own way. But at the end of the day, I feel like it was what could have been a very serious horror film at the very beginning with Chucky 1, Chucky 2, or Child's Play 1 and 2. It's very much just transitioned into a manner that has made it successful. And I don't think that the messaging or anything they're trying to instill is just this woke agenda or anything like that. I think that they're just using society as it is today, and they're just weaving it into this ongoing story with some humorous components, some serious components, some very powerful moments as well on this show. And I think they're doing a very good job at just finding this balance and just incorporating different things from society and different things with life, and just making a straight, you know, slashing Chucky narrative, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So that's why it's more of a positive for me, because I like everything that we're getting in the show. I think it's so far it's been a wild ride. It's been a good time. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into some spoilers here. So if you haven't seen the episode, go check it out, then come back and we're going to talk about it. So 3, 2, 1. Okay, now we're back at the school. We get some wacky dialogue here between Shredded Chucky and Nice Chucky. This was interesting because I wasn't sure what was going to happen here. Was this Chucky going to kill the good Chucky? Which we learn now. Okay, he was. He was just unraveling all his tools, and he was just kind of talking to good guy Chucky like, hey, I'm going to use this on Lexi, I'm going to use this on Devin, and this one's for Jake and you. And that's what pushes good Chucky over the edge, because I thought maybe is he going to brainwash good Chucky and bring him back? But no, and so this is what kind of made me think, okay, this Chucky's really is turning over a new leaf. And I mean, he goes to fight this evil, ripped, shredded Chucky. So we get this epic battle that unfolds, and I've never seen this before. And again, we're in season 2, and this show is still doing amazingly new things. I feel like when I feel like there's times that they can't do something new to surprise me with this show, they end up pulling it and doing it. They don't have to always pull from the history books and like get unanswered storylines with characters that we're familiar with in those previous films, but they can deliver these sometimes familiar characters in wacky settings with a battle like this, for example, that unfolds. It's crazy. So good Chucky basically lunges at Shredded Chucky when he starts talking about his weapons to kill him. And we get this cinematic wonder. It absolutely is crazy. Chucky like holds up a Bible, and then like Shredded Chucky just hits him, and then like good Chucky like hits the wall, looks up, sees the cross on the wall, the church cross, and is like finding God in this moment, and then whips the throwing knives and crucifies Shredded Chucky on the wall, killing him. But he's just pinned up on the wall now, crucified in a position. So it's just crazy. Jake and Devin were listening the whole time, however, to this, and they finally are let into the room by good Chucky, and they see, oh my god, there's Shredded Chucky there. Okay, so we know there's 2 dolls here. This is wild. Good Chucky leaves the office with Jake after hugging him, and we get a little bit more development here with Jake and Devin, because they're not on the same wavelength. Devin doesn't want someone close to them to die, and Jake is just, I feel like, latching on now to good guy Chucky, because good guy Chucky is reminiscent of that foster younger brother. It's kind of just like family that he hasn't had before in a weird, sick, twisted way, because he is a killer doll. But I digress. So Devin is basically left alone in Father Bryce's office, and goes in to try and take out the throwing knives from Shredded Chucky out of the wall. Sure enough, he gets caught. Not a good situation to be in. So it sucks for him. And this is when we transition back to Lexi. She's having a major relapse, and Nadine's working hard to find a solution to hiding Trevor's body. Lexi just can't handle it, runs to the bathroom to indulge in her unfortunate habit. Nadine pops up afterwards and just levels with her. We get to know a little bit more about her character and her mother that indulged at one time, never woke up. So you get a really, really fantastic, powerful moment, and it shows how Lexi is overcoming her addiction, because she just picks up all the pills off the ground with Nadine, and they just throw them all out, so they get rid of them. And I think this is great, because you're seeing some really powerful development here. And then this is when it kind of shifts out of the school here. So I was hoping we would get our characters back in this episode, and we did. And then we kind of go back into Jennifer's home. And now this is when things get really wild, because after last week's episode, the whole murder mystery thing and the Glenda popping up, it just got crazy. So Glenn is still hanging around at Jennifer's home, and we get some one-on-one dialogue where Glenn confronts Jennifer about Nika and Tiffany Valentine as well. We also learn that Glenda admits to Glenn about the murdering of the security guard. So They're just texting. Glenda was not in this episode. It was just Glenn. So at some point we'll get that follow up with Kyle and Glenda, I imagine. And then this is also followed up by another, again, Lexi and Nadine scene. So we got that quick cut kind of moment diving in Jennifer's home, and then we're back at the school. So Lexi and Nadine, they discover Trevor's body is gone. And our group reunites at this point, with the exception of Devin, who is not in a good position because Jake just dismisses that he's not in any trouble. He's just pissed off at him. They're not on the same kind of cohesive moment right now, but that's not what you say when you got killer dolls running around. Like, Devin could have been killed at this point, but no. In this instance, Father Bryce just brings Devin to the church and forces him to read Leviticus from the Bible. We'll speak to that later. During this time, the father returns to his office and brings a fleet of all the staff with him, only to lay accusations on all of them, making him feel like shit for being responsible for this crucified, shredded, beefed out Chucky on the wall. Now, we get interesting discussions here because you can really see the different display of perspectives with the teachers. And Sister Ruth, however, we kind of know where she thinks of the Chucky dolls originally, and she somewhat becomes drawn in here at the crucified doll, but she has to just pull it down as per father's orders and just toss it in the garbage. But before I continue, I'm going to jump to a quick ad break, and we'll be right back. And we're back. So we get a quick flashback here of Devin in the church, and he's reading the Bible, and he lands on a line, "Shall not lay with a man," and he rages hard at this. So this is now Father Bryce had, like, he beat around the bush with this kind of thing with both Devin and Jake, I feel, at this point. And now he's just laying it out hard for them. Just, you're in hot water. You're crucifying dolls with blood in my office. You are having relations with the same gender. Like, this is just not okay. And he's losing his cool because when he had this discussion with the other staff, he was just being absolutely, he was not being very welcoming and understanding. And I can't remember her name, but the one of the sisters, she was extremely nice and just like, she maybe was too nice because she sugarcoated. It's like, yeah, it's just a kid having the creativity. We can't, creativity is not a sin. Questioning isn't a sin. So I understand her perspective, but at the same time, like, they definitely should have enforced more of the let's talk to them and get to know what's going on, because a bloody Chucky doll on the wall in the father's office is definitely a wacky way to describe creativity, but I digress. So, anywho, we end up going back to Jennifer's house. Now, this is when things start to really come into play with Tiffany Valentine. Jennifer's sister is still visiting and is asking her questions that she doesn't have an answer for. So she saunders off to the garage, reveals a giant bird cage. I'm trying to figure out what's going on here, but to our surprise, the original doll is there, if you remember from the films, with the real Jennifer Tilly still in it. So we learn that the doll, Jennifer, this whole time has been answering fan mail, handling paperwork, winning money with online poker, and even voicing Bonnie on Family Guy, which was a really, really funny shout out, I thought. It was a complete surprise and a dynamic I was not expecting, period. Just wild. This show is just full of cliffhangers in between each transition because it ends there and it goes back to the school. Devin's rejoined the group. He's totally just not doing the Bible thing anymore. And he still is pissed that Jake is defending Chucky. Devin basically yells out, though, that, okay, Chucky killed all the people that were close to him, and it's not okay. Like, we need to just do him in now. And Chucky has a panic attack at this almost and runs off. And now we get a moment of one-on-one with Jake. And to me, I feel like, okay, Chucky is really self-reflecting in this bathroom, and Jake just really is leveling with him, and they're just having a bonding moment. And it's hard to know, okay, at this point, is he legit faking it to get in good with the survivors? Was that the plan of the beefy, shredded Chucky, just to kind of set this all up with it? I don't know, but it is convincing if it's the real deal. It's hard to really stand with Devin when this Chucky's being so convincing. But while he's having that moment with Jake, we have Lexi and Devin again, and they're going through Chucky's phone. They charged it, and they're looking through all the photos, and you start noticing, okay, there's these doll body parts in the background, and they deduce it as a trail of breadcrumbs. So they choose to withhold this information from Jake and Nadine when they go and approach. I mean, they withhold that information after they see what Jake is doing, because they were going to go tell him. But when they go to the church, they see Jake is with Nadine and they're baptizing Chucky. They became his godparents and they were blessing him. They were dipping him in the water and everything. It's quite the scene. I've never before thought I would ever see Chucky being baptized. But this is obviously a massive shutoff for Devin. So they leave on their own accord and they get out of there. Now, just like any Chucky doll, it takes a lot to finally kill one. And the one that Sister Ruth tossed in the garbage, the shredded, beefy one, finally wakes back up. And Sister Ruth, who assumes it's the Lord, as we know earlier, we can assume Chucky's going to abuse this privilege of control. Because he falls out and she's like, oh, Lord, praise be. And he's like, yeah, I'm back from the dead. It didn't even take me 3 days. So I'm happy that Shredded Chucky is not down for the count and out, because I really want to see more of what we're going to get with him, because he's so wacky. And we just got him in the last episode at the very end, basically, when the reveal happened. But this is where it kind of concludes that, at least that arc there with those beefy Chuckies. And then we jump back to the house with Jennifer and Tiffany. So Tiffany thinks she has what she wanted from the doll, Jennifer, and goes back to Glenn and her sister, learns that the doll, Jennifer, gave her the wrong information. It was the plot of the Blues Brothers. So she's in extremely hot water now with her sister now, because she's not remembering things that her sister wanted her to remember from their childhood. So this is where it gets really, really escalated. And we learn that Jennifer Tilly, who is locked in the garage in the doll body, was this whole time just wanting chocolate and is just doing everything she can. Like, it's a brutal situation to be in. So Tiffany goes back to the basement to freak out at Jennifer. And unfortunately, Jennifer's real sister and Glenn run off to join Tiffany in the garage. And they see the real Jennifer in the cage. And they're thinking, like, what the heck? There's a brief moment where Jennifer and her sister actually get to like hold each other's hands, because Jennifer is in the cage in doll form and the sister kneels down. They grab each other's hands and they have a moment. And then sure enough, Tiffany freaks out, whips out her knife, starts killing her like crazy. Quite the execution scene. And Glenn is just watching this in total shock. So it kind of concludes here as we kind of like wrap up the episode, where Glenn just calls her out, calls Jennifer or Tiffany out for like, what are you doing? You're a killer. And we just get this powerful line where Tiffany says chillingly, I am Tiffany Valentine and I am your mother. And it just felt so different from how flamboyantly, impersonatingly, flamboyant she was before. Like it was super powerful, and like, okay, this is the character we are familiar with from the Chuckyverse. So moving on from that, we get this intense one-on-one scene where Tiffany starts sharing the truth with Glenn and reveals the original Glenda doll as an additional birthday gift, and the two decide to go find Glenda, show Glenda the doll. So Tiffany starts a fire, basically burns the house down, and now we see Tiffany and Glenn driving off with the Glenda doll in the back seat, as well as the Jennifer tied up doll in the back seat. So I initially thought, oh, did Jennifer die? No, that wouldn't make sense for them just to axe her like that. No, she's in the back seat of the car. They're driving off to find Glenda, who is currently with Kyle. And in closing, Devin and Lexi, they follow the trail. They find a horrific Chucky tribal-like area with a plethora of dead Chuckies, like a lot. And we get a cabin. This cabin has Andy, who is still kicking, as we assumed earlier. And we also see Dr. Miller. She was one of the staff that I didn't mention earlier, but she was with the sisters and Father Bryce in the office. She works at the school. And now it seems like she's in cahoots with Charles Lee Ray and Chucky. We see the Colonel himself. He is a clean-shaved, headed Chucky doll. He's got a little bit of an accent. He definitely is up to no good. He is like, yeah, the bad of bads, I would say. There were some dead bodies that were in there, like another father, the father figure, I guess, from the, the confessional. And then there was one more body that just looked like Charles Lee Ray almost, but I doubt that. But I'm assuming it's Trevor, because at this point we can assume, okay, Trevor's body is gone. And Good Chucky says maybe it's an enemy, because Nadine said, oh, maybe it's a friend. But this is where, okay, Good Chucky's right. An enemy being the doctor of the school. She's up to no good. She's in cahoots with Chucky. So we're going to be getting some very interesting overlapping dynamics here. I'm assuming the doctor maybe she worked here before and was someone who cared for Charles or knew Charles. I'm not sure, but we're gonna get some very interesting stuff for sure as these characters progress in their narratives, and I'm super excited. So that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I'm gonna be back again next week. I can't wait to dive back into this world. It's so freaking fantastic, and we're getting spicy. The escalation is occurring now. So yeah, without further ado, again, we got a newscast dropping later today, and then we're just going to be steamrolling right into the charity stream. So make sure you tune into all of our feeds, our social media channels, because you are in for a treat come this weekend. So until then, take care, and we'll see you in the search bar.